print. This afternoon, we'll be listening to two esteemed speakers, followed by a panel discussion by the expert members. Before I introduce the session flow and discussion, I'd like to invite Dr. Yasmina Yahya, who is the president of PenDaPaT, to deliver her opening remarks. But I'd also like to remind the audiences, if you could please mute yourself. And thank you very much once again for joining us. And we'll begin this session with our opening remarks by Dr. Yasmina Yahya. Dr. Yasmina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amrita. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and good afternoon, everyone. Professor Graham Kendall, Senior VP and Chief Executive, the Good Capitalism Forum. Professor Senior Dr. Khairul Salim Muhammad Sahari, Deputy CEO MQA. Dr. Shahira Labai Lutfi, Deputy Director Global Engagement, IFCC UPM.
Yes.
Mr. Guy Paring, Regional Director, I Graduate Asia UK. Mr. Kabir Shahan Alvi, a postgraduate student of UKM, fellow members of PenDaPaT, and ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's discussion organized by PenDaPaT, a professional and a non-government organization determined to provide informed feedback and suggestion to issues regarding the national higher education policies and practices. Hence, it is very important to foster a collaborative and transparent dialogue between key stakeholders, including policymakers, educational institutions, and the general public to ensure the continual enhancement and development of the higher education landscape for the betterment of our nation's future. So that's the role of PenDaPaT actually. So therefore, it is with this note that we at PenDaPaT felt that the topic chosen today is very timely. And it is considered as one of the most captivating subjects of our time. The large language model, ChatGPT, friend or foe? In an era where technology is rapidly transforming our daily interactions, it's essential to navigate the complexities and implications of the advancements in AI, particularly in the realm of natural language processing. Right? Today, we'll delve into the multifaceted nature of this intelligent chatbot, exploring both the promising potentials they offer and the ethical challenges they pose. Earlier this year, it was written in the Times Higher Education, many universities were banning the use of ChatGPT. However, the most recent one, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, took a different line. Scholars were encouraged to incorporate the AI chatbot into lesson plans, and students were challenged to use the technology to find creative ways into their subjects, with AI modules soon to become part of the core curriculum on all degrees. So that's a different approach, and this enlightened approach is largely down to the university's provost, Chinese computer scientist Yik Guo, who believes ChatGPT is a really good way to deepen students' understanding, particularly in the hardcore sciences. And of course, recently, written in Times Higher Education as well, we hear from the former Imperial College London professor on how he deployed a lifetime of AI research into practical use since joining Hong Kong University Science of Technology last year, and how generative AI more of an evolved Google at present. Therefore, it poses a question that beginning of the year, it was banned, and then there are people who are actually promoting it. Hence, LLM or AI chatbot, is it a friend or a foe? So let us listen to all the speakers today, and we shall unravel the relationship between human interaction and AI, all right, to see the fine line between an invaluable friend, perhaps, and a potential adversary. So let's embark with this particular forum with an open mind and a critical lens, aiming to understand the profound impact of these innovative technologies on our society. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. And let's engage in a thought-provoking conversation because we will use the input. So ask as many questions as you can, because this will be very useful for us to bring up to the public, particularly to the ministry, about the role of large language models in our ever-evolving higher education and digital landscape. So please do enjoy the forum, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Yazrina, for setting up a wonderful background, and everybody, I'm sure, is very excited to hear what our speakers have to say. So the emergence of large language models in higher education landscape, artificial intelligences and natural language processing has brought a phenomenal change. And these sophisticated data-driven models powered by deep learning techniques have profoundly impacted various sectors, including higher education. These LLMs are reshaping the way students learn, educators teach, and institution operates. However, this transformative technology is not only enhancing the accessibility and effectiveness, but it is also posing new challenges for educators and institutions that we must learn to navigate. So keeping this at the forefront, our discourse series this afternoon aims to discuss the impact these large language models are having on higher education settings. So I'll just give a brief overview about how the Discourse series is going to run this afternoon. We will begin with two presentations, followed by a session. Please welcome me in joining the I request people to please mute yourself. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming the speakers for this discourse series. We have with us Dr. Shahira Lebai Lutfi, who is the Deputy Director for Global Engagement, IMCC USM. We also have with us Professor Graham Kendall, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Executive for the Good Capitalism Forum. For the panel discussion, we are joined by Mr. Guy Paring, who is the Regional Director for iGraduate Asia UK, and Professor Dr. Carol Salah Muhammad Sahari, who is Deputy CEO for MQA Malaysia. And we are also joined by a student representative, Mr. Kabir Shehan Alawi, who is a postgraduate student at UKM. So without further ado, we will begin with our lectures. Our first lecture will be on large language models and its impact on higher education. In this session, Dr. Lutfi will delve into the impact of LLMs on higher education by examining how they shape curriculum design, student support, research assessment, and overall educational experience. I'd like to invite Dr. Lutfi and virtual clapping, please.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yep, we can, Dr. Shahira.
Thank you, Kak Yas. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Yazrina Yahya, the president of PenDaPaT, and also all PenDaPaT team for inviting me. I'm not sure if I'm the right person for this, but I will try my best. And everyone, I hope that this will be more of a bi-directional talk instead of just a one-way lecture. So if you have any questions, you can also put it in the chat. I will first share. Hold on, let me just first do this. I need to presentation. Okay. Can everybody see my screen, please?
Yep, we can.
Is it clear, Kak Yas?
Yep, looks clear.
Okay, all right. So actually, I have the whole thing is on education, right? About our perception and what we think about LLM. But I changed a bit the title to the sexy and the wacky of LLMs in TNL, teaching and learning. And this is an academic perspective. Now, I would like to have to emphasize on a disclaimer here that this is my perspective and the perspective of many of my colleagues. It might not represent the perspective of all of the academics in the world. Okay, so if you're clear on that, let me first give a bit of introduction of myself. My name is Shahira Labalutfi, and I'm from the School of Computer Sciences, so I'm a faculty member of the Computer Sciences. I'm also holding an administrative post as the Deputy Director of International Mobility and Collaboration Center, otherwise known as International Office. Okay, all right. Now, let's look at this. Okay, so I think everybody by now know more or less what is LLM, right? It's large language model. It uses natural language processing. So this is one part of artificial intelligence to understand and generate human-like text. This LLM is quite special because it seems to be contextually very aware. So that means it has the ability to communicate like human beings. It's like some of my students would think that this is like speaking, it's tantamount to speaking to someone who has read the entire books of the world, someone who's so knowledgeable, who knows everything. It's like speaking to or conversing with a really intelligent Wikipedia. So otherwise, it's also known as a generative AI or Gen AI. Well, in 2023, open source LLM, they begin showing increasingly impressive results with the release of certain software like Jolly 2.0, Yama, I call it Yama, some people call it Llama, Alpaca, and also Vicuna. So these are some of the applications that are instruction following LLM. So they are known as instruction following, and they are trained on a data set of instruction and response pairs. Usually the commercials integrate them and use them as chatbots. Okay, and these programs now with ChatGPT 4, they have set a new benchmark for both parameter size and performance. If I'm not mistaken, ChatGPT 3 or ChatGPT, it has more than 1,700 parameters. But with this, it is more, it's bigger. Right, next. So this is funny story. I was talking like when Dr. Yadrina approached me. So a few days ago, I was talking to some of my friends. What do you think about ChatGPT, about LLM? So I asked one friend who is specifically in natural language processing, and her name is Dr. Gan. So I was saying, hey, Gan, she's also my good friend. I said, I've got this talk on our experiences as educators, on ChatGPT and LLM. Do you have anything that you think worth sharing? What is your experience? Her answer is very simple. This is the answer. Ask the LLM. Isn't that what we all are doing? So every time, especially students, also lecturers, nowadays, we are using ChatGPT and they're using it quite excessively, even me. All right, but I explain how I use it later. Okay. There are several uses, especially in commercial, but in education, teaching and learning, I find these three things very important. I mean, these three functions where LLM is involved, how LLM is involved, observe. The first thing is content generation, second is language, and the third is actually sentiment analysis. So with content generation, one of the most common use is on, for both academics and students, is to come up with assignment. Correct, Kabir? Your student representative, right? Do you use ChatGPT for your assignments?
Yes, I do.
You do? Yes. So, all right. So most of my students, they use it for assignments, for case studies, to solve math questions, and sometimes sometimes I always like to use ChatGPT to summarize things and also to explain things to me like I am 5 years old, without using any jargon or whatever, just for me to get some fundamental information about some things, all right, about some things that I would like to know. And for academics, we may use it to construct exam questions sometimes. This is the truth, but it is not like we copy and paste it. Most of the time, we just would like to have some inspiration to get some, what do you call this, something to kick off, something, we give some scenarios and it will come up with some question, especially Malaysia, we are all very restricted when coming up with exam questions because we've restricted with this thing called OBE, suspended is an outcome-based education. I think those academics from Malaysia, they would be very familiar with this. So sometimes we use, I use ChatGPT to come out with some exam question and I will build onto it. So I do not really take it literally, all right? And very importantly, for both students and academics, it can be used as an inspiration. Okay, this is the sexy thing about LLM. So sexy meaning that the ideal thing, whether they are using it that way or not, it might be something else. Now, we should not be taking everything literally. Second thing is on language. Most of my students, they use this ChatGPT for summarization, for paraphrasing or translation. Now, an entire content chapter of the book, papers, data, like those from call centers or some, we work with data from call centers, some messages, some Twitter data and whatnot. It can be more easily, we can summarize it and we can easily digest the content. Most of the time, students use it for that, especially from People Republic of China, they excessively use ChatGPT to actually translate. Okay, students, they use a lot to paraphrase email, to translate email. They use it as a translation tool. Now, as more LLMs are trained in other languages, the quality and availability of this will continue to improve. And sometimes we use it also for sentiment analysis. Like instead of putting the labels, sentiment analysis is when you want to know whether certain product review, for example, if you take a data of product review, you want to know whether this is good or bad or positive or negative, what people think about it. So instead of putting the labels and training it, they just put some cluster, they just feed it in the ChatGPT and they want to have the output, that means in terms of sentiments. So instead of just labeling, they're using ChatGPT to label this kind of data instead of getting independent labelers. All right. So these are some of the sexy or the ideal use of ChatGPT when it comes to teaching and learning. Now, I would like to again emphasize when it comes to lecturers, yes, we do use it, but then just as an inspiration, and we will build on the questions, the assignments, and sometimes I just take and just adapt, not adopt. All right. Okay. Now, this is very important. But what is the wacky? We already spoke about the sexy thing just now, right? So now we are moving on to talk about the wacky, the reality, when it comes to content generation, as we were talking about earlier. We were speaking about content generation, the language, and also sentiment analysis, right? So the biggest thing that we, or as academics, have detected is misinformation. Okay, the most important. This is a very important fact. Now, it can also create a false narrative, and I have myself detected this time and again. What is false narrative? Now, large language models, they may generate false narrative or factually incorrect answers due to the ability to predict. Large language models, they actually predict the next syntactically correct word without true understanding. So how it works is trying to predict statistically the next syntactically correct words, and therefore it doesn't really understand what you are saying like a human being. And one funny fact is that when I was teaching some students from humanities, a lot of these students actually believe that LLMs are actually human in the background. Human was sitting at the background of the screen, and they are actually answering you as fast as possible by information retrieval. They're doing some quick information retrieval, and they're emotionally correct. Not politically correct, but emotionally correct. Okay, so even there was a study, all right, there's a very recent study in 2023 on preference of patients between chatbot responses, LLM, chatbot responses, and also human physician responses. And they showed that the responses were preferred. The chatbot responses were statistically significantly preferred over physician responses. And they were also significantly rated higher for both empathy and quality. They were found to be significantly more empathetic. Okay, because emotion, now my area is actually affective computing, where I model emotion. Emotion can be modeled, but it also depends on culture, because emotion is different from culture to culture. But anyway, it can be modeled. So this is also statistical modeling, but it doesn't mean that it understands truly the emotion, right? I have the papers. If you see one of my notes, then you will see the reference to the paper. Okay, and LLMs, how it works actually is to predict the next best. Like I was mentioning, it works by predicting the next best syntactically correct words, not understanding what the human is actually asking for. I can give you an example. The author of paper A, I have detected this myself from thesis of my student. The author of paper A, let's say, is X when it's actually Y. Okay, and this is why this is statistical error. This is actually a statistical error because you do not know where it is pulling its data from, right? I mean, who labels the data? Where is it actually getting these sources from? And so sometimes the answer may sound so great and so believable, but it can be 100% factually wrong. So I say it's a statistical error, okay? And LLM, it annotates its sources from totally wrong answers. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it can come. For example, I can give you an example. For example, anybody can have a domain. Anybody can have a free domain right now. So I can sign up in a free domain, have a website. You can sign up free domain, have a website, and then you can totally bogus. Sorry. Okay. So so we can sign up. Each of us can actually sign up on a domain name, buy a domain, and then we can create a website, and we can put all kind of wrong information or bogus information. And if this LLM pulls our information and train our data and model its answer from our data, then it's going to be wrong anyway, right? Because garbage in, garbage out. And then what we notice, it is really great for formative assessment. Formative assessments are something like usually coursework assessment. You have your assignment, you have your case studies, and sometimes you have your online test, and also for online tests sometimes. But it is not really, of course, when students are not able to use it for summative assessment during the final exam, and we will see really different output in their grades. Like, for example, formative assessment, probably they get an A minus, and when it comes to final exam, suddenly they get a C or C minus or fail. Why? Because they're depending too much. There's a great dependence on ChatGPT. Right. And the other thing is we may have also consent and copyright problem because we do not know exactly where it's pulling the data from. That's why we actually need to vet the answer that's actually given. The other thing is bias. What I find out, for me, in my opinion, I think it's very Western centric. Sometimes you may need to include prompts like, please include authors that are non-Western and women, and you still cannot expect for it to understand your prompt. You know, sometimes I can give you an example. Okay, for example, this. I was very interested with. So I was also including some of this, information in my work because it has multidisciplinary, because of its multidisciplinary nature. And I was trying to look for who is the first scientist who discovered OCD. Now, according to ChatGPT, everybody will go to ChatGPT now before they Google it, right? That is the trend, right, Kabir? Do you go to ChatGPT first or you go to Google first?
Right now, I just go to ChatGPT first because I get the
You're not the only one, because it's fast, right?
answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I have to do a lot of research, go websites after websites to find my answer.
Yeah. So it actually summarizes everything and just give it you in a block like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did my camera freeze?
Yes.
Shah?
Yes.
Dr. Shah, your camera is freeze, and then you've got like another 2 more minutes, just 1 more minute to sum up actually, because
Okay. I go very fast. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for the camera freezing. So this OCD, for example, in ChatGPT, it says that, you know, some Western scientists found out in late 19 and all, but actually the truth is it was, you know, by Al-Bahi, who's a Muslim Islamic psychologist in the 9th century. Okay. So the other thing is also profession spells caution. Now, most of the students use this ChatGPT unnecessarily and sometimes exaggerated, and sometimes it appears to be, you know, whatever output that they are giving you appears to be excessively scholarly. It's not genuine. Sometimes you feel menyampah. You know, menyampah is a word like you feel annoyed with it. So whatever is so impressive, quote unquote, that the message that you're trying to convey does not make any freaking sense sometimes. Right? This is one example. All right. This is a student of mine trying to do a facial detection using Boko Haram because we're looking at the facial features. And this is what he wrote. And when I read this in the thesis, I told him to please change this. The realm, you see, technology, wizardry, enter-transfer learning models, those face detection maestro train and Smolgar's board of divers. I don't even understand some of the words it's trying to say. This is another example of a student sending me email. All right, I know this student, I know his personality more or less. You know, he was just trying to ask me to increase, to add on his mark for the test, but he was giving me some unnecessary, you know, sentences time and again, a few times, you know, because he just put things in ChatGPT and out, and we know it for sure. All the lecturers know this. All right. So with that, I would like to conclude. LLM is actually not a shortcut. And if people use it often and extensively to replace how they do things previously, then it can be a regressive step. Okay? It can also be progressive, but it can be regressive as well. So there are what I note is that there are more positive sentiment about using ChatGPT among universities in China than most other regions. It's probably because they're using it extensively for translation. And are we, a very important question that we need to ask ourselves is that, are we training students to be critical thinkers? There are also more and more training. There's a trend of training programs in like LinkedIn, all these platforms for micro-credential, teaching students on how to come up with the correct prompts instead of how to critically think whatever they're doing, whatever problem that they are working on. Okay, so this is something that I would like you to go back home and ponder on this question. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for listening and for your patience. Thank you, Dr. Yasrina, and also thank you, Chairman. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Shahira. I think you have experienced all that, and all of us in academia have experienced, and it's wonderful listening to your unique experiences. I think it's time for us to move to the second lecture. Professor Kendall will be delivering his lecture on ethical use of large language models in higher education. And in this lecture, Professor Kendall will draw on his recent publications as well as his lived experiences to explore the ethical landscape of large language models and how they can be used as well as abused. He will in particular highlight his research on predatory publishing by demonstrating how ChatGPT can be abused. And he will also provide thoughts on how large language models can be used ethically. So over to you, Professor Kendall, and I will keep a tab of your time. You don't have to worry. Please go ahead with your thoughts. And to the audiences, please keep sending your questions, and we will read out your questions to the speakers towards the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've shared my screen. Can everyone see that? Yeah?
Yes.
Good,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So thanks very much. I've got about 20 minutes, so please, if I go over, please just jump in and tell me. I might lose track of time. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks to Roz and Yasrina and the team for doing this very interesting topic. Like the last speaker, I'm also a computer scientist. I was at the University of Nottingham for over 20 years, 12 years in Malaysia. So yeah, it's very much a computer science sort of centric talk, I suppose. But as was said, I want to talk about the ethical use of large language models, ChatGPT, and they're not the same, but we can use the term interchangeably for this. So these are things I want to talk about. I really want to talk about, is ChatGPT really being used in research? And what do journals think about that? I then very briefly want to touch on predatory publishing if you're not aware of what that is. And then I want to talk about the good, the bad and the ugly of ChatGPT, and then I'll conclude and discussion and Q&A, however we're going to do that. So first is ChatGPT already being used? And the answer is, of course it is. There's no question about that. Everybody seems to be using it, not just in academia, but in all walks of life. But I just want to focus on a couple of examples of where it's being used so we can see how it's being used in academia, which you may not be aware of. So this is a recent paper. Obviously, all these papers are recent with regard to ChatGPT. And this is, if you've never seen a website called PubPeer, P-U-B-P-W-E-R. It's really where people go in and can talk about papers, and it gets a bit critical, which I guess is what it's designed for. But this paper recently appeared on PubPeer, and it's got the term in it, regenerate response. There's a certain person out there, an academic sleuth, who goes around looking for this terminology in papers at the moment, suggesting, and it probably is right, that they've used ChatGPT and they've been it's not beat about the bush. They've been stupid enough not to at least take that out of their paper when they pasted it in. So they found this paper with regenerate response in, and top right, the author responded saying they did use ChatGPT in revising the English. They had pasted the regenerate response in, but they also rewrote the text before the final submission. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but that's what the author said. And then there was a correction published in the paper, which essentially took out that phrase. Whether that's right or not, I'm not sure, because if you just take it out, there's still no guarantee that what was presented was not written by ChatGPT. This is another example, again from PubPeer, where regenerate response appears in the paper. And then someone's commented below that the PDF of that article no longer carries that text. And was the PDF manipulated without notice? And what they mean by that is if there's something wrong with a piece of academic work which has been given a DOI, it's part of the scientific archive, if you want to correct that paper, you have to do it via an erratum. You can't, or you shouldn't be able to change the original PDF. And I believe in this case, that's what was done. The publisher changed the PDF and took out that phrase. And that might seem a small point, but actually that's not the way the scientific archive works. And I think it's to protect the author, because they're probably a bit embarrassed about leaving that in, but it's also to protect the publisher, because I think this is one of the mainstream publishers, because the publisher will be embarrassed that their peer review hasn't picked up that phrase. So they're keen to take it out of the scientific literature rather than issue an erratum. There's another example on the right-hand side of this screen, and the comment in PubPeer is that actually if you use a ChatGPT or an LLM, you're meant to acknowledge that. You're meant to acknowledge that in the paper to say we've used it. No one minds people using it as long as they use it in the right way, but you have to acknowledge it. And people aren't doing that. I mean, you will see in a minute how many papers have been published with ChatGPT or addressing ChatGPT, but there'll be no acknowledgements in there. You know, it'll be in the very, very small percentages, if not less than 1%. So that's an issue that the publication industry faces at the moment with ChatGPT already being used. And this was from Nature only a few days ago, 16th of October. It says around one in three respondents, I don't know what the sample size was, postdocs, about a third are using ChatGPT to generate or refine text, generate text or edit code. And you know that should be a worry to us, because we don't know how they're using it or what they're using it for eventually. Are they just cutting and pasting ChatGPT text into papers? And we know that does happen because we've got evidence of that. I just showed you some of that, but there's lots of other evidence around. This just gives you some idea of how many papers have been published in ChatGPT. Last year, ChatGPT really comes to the fore in November 2022. Last year, 3 papers were published. This is a search on Scopus, looking for only in the title, not in abstracts or anything, looking for the term ChatGPT. 3 papers were published in 2022. Over 1,500 papers have been published this year already with ChatGPT in the title. And there's already 7 lined up for 2024. That means that 5 papers are being published every day with ChatGPT in the title. So I think it shows that people are not only using it for generating text, code, or whatever, but people are also doing significant amounts of research on that. And a lot of it seems to be in the medical area. So this is the Annals of Biomedical Engineering have published 54 papers, Nature 24 papers, Radiology 17, etc. You can go down the list and you quickly get into papers that look at writing for the scientific literature, some of the papers we'll see later on. But it seems very much to be used in the medical literature. These are the universities, just by way of context of what I'm going to say in a minute. These are the universities on the left-hand side that have published most papers. And these are the countries. So the United States have published 440 papers, India 191, UK 129. And I put that up because I just wanted to look at Malaysia, because I've obviously got an interest in Malaysia, living and working here. Out of these 1,500 papers this year, Malaysia have published 16, which I think is quite low, because this seems to be low-hanging fruit at the moment. It seems quite easy to get published on ChatGPT, and people have got an interest in that in Malaysia. I would encourage you to look at that. And these are the universities which have published the most papers. USM, which I'm sure our previous speaker will be very happy about. no surprise there, I guess. But then SEGI, UUM, and UITM. But if you've got an interest in ChatGPT or LMMs, then I think it's a very fruitful research area at the moment. And just to show, I mean, it's not just confined to Google, if you like, trying to find out about ChatGPT. This is a screenshot from YouTube. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of YouTube videos, well, it will be thousands, looking at how to use ChatGPT. Some of them ethically. This second one down says how to use it ethically. The top one, I've not looked at these videos, to be honest. I've looked at some of them, but not these ones. This top one I will be very worried about from an ethical point of view. This one, the third one down, I will be very worried about when it says step-by-step guide with examples. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You can go onto YouTube and say, how do I get rid of plagiarism? Well, people are now posting YouTube videos on how do I use ChatGPT and not get caught in the scientific literature. And there's also courses. So Udemy is a big course provider. They've got courses on ChatGPT as well. So it's all good, but it's also there's some significant worries there. But what do journals say about this? I mean, journals are the gatekeepers of the scientific archives, the scientific literature. What do they say? So this is just one report that I found, the Hastings Centre report. But if you go and look at most journals or most publishers, so Wiley, Springer, Nature, all the big journals, they'll all have basically the similar things. So this was a statement by a number of journal editors and signed by various other people. And it essentially says that if you use LLMs, they cannot be listed as authors on the papers. There's one I haven't put it on the slides, but there's an example where someone listed an LLM on a paper, and then there was an erratum issue taking that person off. And there's lots of literature out there, and amongst these 1,500 papers this year, saying why that can't be the case. And it's essentially because generated text in that way, they can't own the copyright, they can't be responsible for what's published, only a human being can be responsible, etc., etc. So you won't see these days, and we're only about a year in, you won't see these days LLMs, ChatGPT type things being listed as an author on any papers. It says authors should be transparent about their use of generative Gen AI, and editors should have access to tools and strategies for ensuring that transparency. And I don't think that's being done at the moment. I think people are using Gen AI and not being transparent about it. And that's a major issue that the sector needs to address. There's also been some evidence that reviews are being done by Gen AI. So it's given a paper and it said, can you write a review for this paper? And that's, according to these principles, which I agree with, should not be allowed. It states that editors and reviewers have that final responsibility in deciding whether a paper should be published or not. And the final responsibility lies with human editors and authors. So I think most reasonable academics would agree with these principles. The danger is, or the problem is trying to detect those things. So I just want to say a few words about predatory publishing. If you don't know what predatory publishing, I'll give you a 1 sentence, 2 sentence description, but it's a topic in its own right. With the advent of open access, which started probably 12, 15 years ago, open access means that the author pays to publish their paper rather than handing the copyright over to the publisher, and then they monetize that by selling it via subscriptions or downloads. So the author pays, and that's opened up a massive market of what they call predatory journals, where essentially you submit your journal, your paper, you get charged for publishing it, it goes through peer review or not, but if it does go through peer review, it's very lightweight. And those journals come in and out of business. They don't promote your work. It's just rubbish, really. And Jeffrey Bill, the paper on the left there was a paper I wrote in 2021 about his legacy. He really started highlighting the problems of predatory publishers. He got into quite a bit of trouble about it for good and bad reasons. If you're interested, have a look at that paper. It sort of gives the good and the bad, if you like. And he wasn't bad. He just, in hindsight, he could have done things a lot better. So he did a lot of work on the battle against predatory publishing, but it's got worse. It's been here, as I say, 10, 12 years. and it's got very much worse. So this paper, the first paper he wrote, or the first 4 papers he wrote, he outlined what he thought was a number of predatory publishers, about, I think, 18 predatory publishers. And myself and Simon Lineker revisited that work in 2022 and looked at what's happened to those publishers. And this is just some headlines. This is a graph from that paper. Omix, if you've not heard of Omix, Omix is the only proven predatory publisher. They were fined by a US court 50.1 million, I think 2017, something like that. And they've never paid it because they're not based in the US. But they're the only proven predatory publisher. In the original paper of Beale, they were published in 68 journals. About 10 years on, they're now publishing 742. So the number of journals they publish, which are proven to be predatory, has gone up by nearly 1,000%. Another paper, scientific research, another publisher, scientific research publishing, went from 159 journals to 327, 106% increase. They are, in my view, a predatory publisher, but not being tested in court. So depending how you look at the figures, and the paper that I've just showed you, this paper by myself and Lineker goes through the statistics, but depending how you look at it, the number of predatory journals that have between when Bill did his original work and when we did the reanalysis has gone up by 25%. So it's certainly not, and this is only last year, so it's certainly not a problem that we're keeping up with, let alone addressing. So predatory publishing is a problem, and I wanted to touch on that because I'll talk a bit about that very briefly at the end. So what's the good about ChatGPT and LLMs? Well, I think we've heard about this in the last talk. It does level the playing field for non-native English speakers, or even people who aren't that good at putting their words on paper. So that's fine. I mean, you can do that. I think you should have that acknowledged in the paper, but that's fine. It can suggest titles. I mean, I've put my abstracts into ChatGPT before and said, can you suggest the title? I'm amazed at the good titles that it comes up with, certainly better than I would do. It can draft abstracts from a paper, and draft being the operative word there, because you need to refine it. I've seen it be used for drawing out research questions from existing papers. So most papers have a future work where you can ask ChatGPT to paste in the text and say, can you tell me what future research directions I can do? It can propose structures. You can ask it to structure a paper. And this is where some of the bad, if you like, YouTube videos go. They say, can you give me a research question? Can you structure a paper? And then it goes on and basically says, can you write this section, and this section, and this section, put it all together, submit it, and hopefully get it accepted. And you will get it accepted if you send it to a predatory publisher. And it can summarize papers, so people are more and more using it to craft their literature reviews. And you have to be careful how to do that, because if you're submitting a paper, you need to understand the context and what's been done before, but you can use it to summarize your paper. So I would put these things in as good ways of ChatGPT, or potentially good ways. The bad ways, it can be used as a replacement for research. There's lots of discussion in the literature and in the media that eventually, will we need scientists, or can we just get AI to keep developing it faster and faster? So do we need it as a replacement for research? At the moment, it doesn't replace research, because as we know, it's really just looking at everything it can on the internet and summarizing it. There's nothing new there. The technology's not there yet, although I think it's coming, where it can actually add new knowledge, if you like. It's assuming that the generated text is correct. I've seen examples where you can, very simply based, you can say to ChatGPT, what is 9 plus 1? And it says 10. And you say, no, actually it's 11. And it says, sorry. And you say, what is 9 plus 1? And it'll tell you 11. You can do things like that so that you can actually tell ChatGPT it's wrong, and it'll regurgitate that to you. So what comes out is not necessarily correct, and you need to check that. It can make you lazy, I mean, by doing all of these things. So I think essentially you become a ChatGPT expert rather than an expert in the domain that you're trying to address. Referencing previous work has been an issue. That's getting better. It makes up references sometimes, or it makes up references, and or it gives you references which aren't really suitable to what you're talking about. I believe, and this could be controversial, but not acknowledging your use of ChatGPT is wrong. In the papers that I write now, especially around predatory publishing and ChatGPT, I always say, whether I use ChatGPT or not, and I haven't yet, but I say no generative AI was used in the development of this paper. And one of the real problems is unable to detect AI-generated text. If you speak to people, say from Turnitin, and I only use that as an example, they can't detect AI-generated text at the moment. And if they can, it's like an arms race. Then people will, the people who are asking the ChatGPT will get better and better. Turnitin and the other plagiarism tests will get better and better, and we'll be there, forever, just trying to get the better of each other. So just an example of the bad, in 2016, I wrote a paper saying, is there a role for publication consultants? And essentially says, if you use, say, an English language, someone to improve or correct your English language, should you acknowledge that in the paper? And the answer is yes, I believe you should do that. And I think the same still holds true for ChatGPT. If you use ChatGPT, you should acknowledge it in the paper. And just where it can go wrong, so we wrote this paper, again, this was earlier this year, 2023. Someone had written a piece of software that said it could classify, you put in a URL of a journal and it'll tell you whether it's predatory or not. We looked at, I think 25,000 journals. We put them through this tool and it's classified over 17,000 of them as predatory, which they are not. It even classified the journal that their paper was published in as predatory, when it is not, in my view. And the original authors have said, there are problems with it, and you should urge caution. But some of the journals we put in there were the top, I think, 2,500 journals listed on Scopus. So if this is right, it's saying that, I don't know, 80% of the journals listed on Scopus are predatory. So I think we and the original authors believe that there are some faults with that tool, but it just shows you the problems in trying to classify predatory journals. So the ugly, and I'm not going to dwell on this because I'm talking about this in a few days' time, but there are people out there who sell authorships, who promote predatory publishing, i.e. the publishers and the journals, and people who produce papers that you can buy, or they want to try and promote their cause. A company might pay someone to produce a paper so they can promote themselves in the scientific literature. That has got lots and lots easier now that ChatGPT is about. It may have taken you 2 or 3 weeks to write a paper out of a paper mill before. I'm not sure how they were generated. ChatGPT, any one of us could sit there and produce 100 papers today and send them into journals. We could sell the authorships. We could certainly get them published in predatory journals. So I'm not going to dwell on that. We've got a talk next week, week after, a week Tuesday. There's various people talking about ChatGPT and its effect on tertiary education, 31st of October. I'll be talking about this topic, this paper that I co-wrote earlier this year, May this year, on predatory publishing, paper mills and selling authorships. If you want to register, there's a URL there. We are full because it's a face-to-face event only, although we will be sending out videos of the talks afterwards. So, myself and my colleague, if it's full, we'll tell you you're on a wait list, and then we'll see where we go. But if you're interested, let me know. But if you're interested and you want the videos afterwards, let us know. So in conclusion, is that a bit of a chase there? So large language models, AI is here to stay. I mean, there's no way we're going to go back.
Di
It's
pa
got
ba? Ano ba to?
benefits.
Baka nga nag-cellphone. Stand.
It's got many benefits. It's got many challenges for scientific writing, but it's got significant opportunities for unethical publishers. And I think that's the sort of area that I'm researching now, or looking at with paper mills and selling authorships. So happy to, I'm going to hand back to our MC and moderator, but happy to discuss and take Q&A. But if anyone's interested, that's some papers that I've written on this general area of predatory publishing and ChatGPT. So I'll end there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Kendall. I think it was amazing to hear, the facts that you have shared are mind-boggling. I was never aware of the statistics that you have presented. And yeah, I mean, we do have questions, but I'd just like to begin with my question is, do you mean to say that the journals are able to detect which paper is written with LLM use? And that's how you have the statistics, like which country and which university is using it the most?
So I think there's three questions there. The first question is how many universities are using it. These are papers written by scholars with ChatGPT in the title. So those 1,500 papers, they are valid peer-reviewed papers. They were taken from Scopus. If you believe that Scopus is a decent indexing service, which I generally do, although they've allowed predatory publishers in there before, not allowed them, but they have got in there before. So those 1,500 papers we should take as good peer-reviewed journals which address challenges and opportunities on ChatGPT. Journals are struggling. If I go and wrote a paper now using purely ChatGPT and sent it to a journal, they would, and I took out things like regenerate, and the other phrase that people look at is as a large language model, I can't answer that. Took out the obvious things. Many journals would struggle to detect that because for two reasons, I think. One, they don't have the tools to do it, but also it's not something which associate editors or reviewers are looking at. They're reviewing the paper as we've always done. So it's not something which is really on the radar.
Right. So we do have a few questions, and people are wondering if there are any tools available to detect if the assignment or the papers are written using LLMs. And as you mentioned, there are not very many. And if there are, then it's going to be like arm raised. So you just mentioned that. So it does pose a big challenge for academicians, of course, for the publishing, but also for the academics, for teachers. Because I mean, how do you think, like you or Dr. Sahira would like to answer, because there are no tools available for us to detect if students or authors have used LLMs, do you think it challenges the assessment practices and as well as it challenges the knowledge generation in academia?
I think sorry, can I just answer that and then I'll stop them all. I don't think there are tools available, not tools which are robust. And I think it's reliant on everybody in the life cycle of a paper to be ethical. It's got to be the authors, the publishers, the reviewers, the journals, the editors-in-chief, and they've got to work together. And I think at the moment, everyone just says, well, it's not my, it's an author's problem, but once an author's written a paper which is unethical, then it just gets sent in, and I don't think anyone sees it as their particular problem. The only thing that people are doing, and I noticed MOHE recently banned all public universities from submitting to three publishers, MDPI, Hindawi, and Frontiers in. And that broad brush approach, I think, is welcomed. I mean, I think if you can't micromanage it, then do something. Now, MDPI, Frontiers, and Hindawi will be seething that Malaysia dares do that, but China has done it in some universities, other countries have done it. But that's predatory publishing. That's not the use of LLMs. So it's a huge problem, and I don't think that the scholarly publishing sector is anywhere near keeping up with the problems that the tsunami it's about to face.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Professor Kendall. And we have one more question from Dr. Yasrina. And she says, in what ways can educators implement effective measures and tools to encourage independent thinking, creativity, and production of original and meaningful contents that contributes to advancement of knowledge and scholarship in the academic community? I mean, I will just extend her question, and I'd ask academicians, like, what can we do as teachers to, should we teach our students how to use these LLMs ethically, so that we are also teaching them to think independently and to have creative thinking? It requires a balance, but are there any specific strategies that you can share with us?
Yeah, I'll talk again. I would say two things. I think you've got to well, not teach ethics, but you've got to get ethics ingrained into the scientific community. It's not easy because it's just not. I think two things could help, and I'm not sure we can do these. One is open science. At the moment, if I submit a paper and it gets accepted, you don't know what the peer reviewer said. You have no idea what the peer reviewer said. You have no idea what my response is. And with predatory journals, especially, then there is no peer review, so there's nothing to see. So if it was become common that all reviews could be seen by anybody, then that would address the problems. But obviously, there's a lot of people don't want to do that. And the other thing is, publishing is now a business. I mean, Wiley. I think their profit margin is bigger. Their margin is bigger than Google. I mean, it's crazy. And predatory publishing are coming in on top of that. Back in the day, when publishing started 350 years ago with the Royal Society, they did it because they were the Royal Society. They weren't in it to make money, but it's very much a business now. And when it's motivated by business, then you're going to get some unscrupulous characters in there, even the major publishers. And that's the criticism that MDPI have got. MDPI, who MOHE have now banned, they published last year, I think, 900 special issues a day, every day, 900 special issues. And they get a lot of criticism for that, but they're doing it to make money because they can pass the work on to guest editors, and it's the guest editors who are then promoting going out to the market and getting their friends to submit papers, but they have to pay for that privilege, and LLMs will only promote that because you'll be able to write more papers. So I think open science would help, and stopping publishing as a business would help, but I can't see that happening. I can't see how you can do that.
Can I add on that, please?
Yeah.
I'm sorry about my camera. I do not know what happened because it got freezed. Well, in Malaysia also, these 3 publishers that Professor Kendall mentioned are actually banned, but not fully banned. Why not fully banned? Because you're not allowed to use any funding from the government to pay, but then it's not linked to the KPI. So if you do still submit your paper to these 3 publishers, the KPI is still counted.
Yeah.
So I find that is also counterproductive. I mean, they should just totally ban it. I have more and more colleagues that are actually publishing in MDPI, and if you see even the reviews that come to you, it is using ChatGPT, and sometimes it repeats all the abstract, and they just give you 5 or 6. And after you have published, and after they have accepted, you will receive yet another email asking you whether you want to use their English proofreading service. And you should, because you have a problem with your English. That's what they practically tell you. So I find it a bit, unethical. So first of all, probably we have to solve that problem first. And when it comes into using or checking students, even if there are tools available, even if there are tools that are available for us to check whether the students have, used ChatGPT or not, I do not think with the influx or with the flooding of students coming from China to Malaysia, all right, each lecturer nowadays, they have like one lecturer probably have 50 to 60. That is the students, that is the ratio, or probably more. You're not going to sit down in front of the computer and check one by one, and that is not practical, right? So teaching ethics is one thing, but also instilling in the student that you are coming for knowledge and not just for the degree or for all these KPI thing for the lecturers. So I think instilling that to them that this is what you need to. And the other thing is, we can already see this is not working when you see such a difference in their results between the formative assessment and also the summative assessment. So like I mentioned earlier, they get all A and A plus in their assignments and in their projects, but then they end up failing their exam. So in Malaysia, the system is that you can combine both, so that is carry marks, right, from formative to summative, and then you carry the mark, and then finally you see what is the final marks. And if they pass, they pass. But we should change the system. So if they fail either one, they should fail. But then also it comes back again to the student. So it's a whole ecosystem.
I know, yeah.
It works with the China student. And if they do fail, the lecturers will hate it, because during the short semester or KSCP, it will come back to them. And this is the only time the lecturers have to finish up their other works when they are not teaching. So it's a whole ecosystem that we have to look at. It's a whole, it's like it's creating what do you call this?
It's a vicious cycle,
Yes. It's a vicious cycle. So it's a whole thing. It's the policy, it's also the attitude, it's everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yes, the commercial interest of predatory journals and these LLMs, and somehow academia is in between, and we all have to figure out the best way we could handle these new challenges. So thank you, Professor Kendall, and thank you, Dr. Shahira. We would now move to the panel session, and I would invite the speakers. I hope Dr. Lutfi has joined, and Mr. Guy Perrin, you will be moderating the session, so I'll give it to you. And I'm just trying to look from other speakers. I know that we have our panel speakers are here, and because there are too many people, so I cannot see Professor Dr. Carroll if he's with us.
He's there.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's awesome. Okay, great.
Thank you so much, Amrita. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for the team behind this session, Yasrina and Rosalini. And if the panelists can perhaps turn on their cameras and everyone else turn off their cameras, then it's clear to me who's on the panel. Graham, if maybe you can turn your camera on, that would be great.
I'm sorry, Guy.
Yes, we've got technical problems.
Yes.
We've covered a great many areas. I think we've got about 45 minutes to wrap up the session with some questions. I'm going to start with Kabir, who's a student, and I really kind of want him to reflect on how has this whole area of ChatGPT and LLM affected your studies. Maybe you can reflect. And you're based in Bangladesh, that's correct?
Yes, right now I'm in Bangladesh, and I'll be flying back soon back to Malaysia.
Great.
So hello everyone, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on how is ChatGPT currently helping us with our studies. So I'm a student in master's program, and I have noticed that the most commonly used AI platform by us students is the ChatGPT. Though they use other platforms for image editing, video editing, and social media content. Maybe those are used by the digital marketing students and maybe for other subjects. But me as an information system student, mostly what I am experienced with is using ChatGPT, and I have a first-hand experience using that for most of my assignments because it makes everything easier for me. So previously, as Dr. Sahira mentioned, that it's what is ChatGPT and everything. Like it's the natural large language model text which is generated like human text, and it's very hard to differentiate between human text and the AI generated text these days. I There's like few things I could mention about how ChatGPT has helped me.
Please.
So firstly, I could talk about like me as a student and even working sometimes. It's like maybe I'm doing my work middle of the night, and it's like a 24/7 study buddy. So when I have ChatGPT with me, I'm doing my homework middle of the night. It's always there to help me. It can help me do my maths. It can create charts for me. It can create tables for me to differentiate between two things. Then I can speak about how quickly I can get my answers. It's like if I was using search engines to get an answer for something, uh, it takes me quite a while because I have to go one website after another, go to Wikipedia, read through it, understand the concept, and then go through other things to understand what is happening. But when I'm asking it to ChatGPT, I get a straightforward answer, which is summarized, and I can paraphrase it to make it my personal feed. So
Sorry to interrupt, but do you feel though that it's making your life too easy in a sense? I mean,
yes.
Graham sort of mentioned
There is
that
a
in his.
overuse of it in my life actually at this
Yeah.
point. I'll come back to that point. Other than that, the good part is it keeps me motivated to study. That I don't lose hope, because if when I'm doing my assignments, normally it takes a long time to do all the research and figure out what I need to put for my assignment and for my project. But when I'm using ChatGPT, it's really speedy and I'm getting out my answers really quick.
Right.
So it is making my life easier. And other than
Fantastic.
that,
We'll come back. We'll come back to you later. Okay. I want to move around the panel. Don't worry.
all
We'll
right, sure.
speak again. But I want to bring in Prof. Kyril, who's joined us from the MQA. Dr. Kyril, nice to see you.
Nice seeing you, Guy. And also thank you for inviting us to this discussion.
Absolutely. Obviously, you had other meetings beforehand, but what we wanted to do was kind of touch on some of the sort of the regulatory concerns that you might have. Obviously, as these large language models become much more influential and powerful, do you, from the MQA perspective, and indeed from a personal perspective, do you have concerns, and what should you be doing as a regulator?
Thank you very much. I think our approach in Malaysia, we have, in MQA actually in particular, we have published an advisory note dated 31st of March 2023, which we put in basically what we have in the advisory note is advising the institutions, the lecturers, staff, and also the students on how to use what we call as generative AI ethically and responsibly. So we are not saying no to generative AI, including ChatGPT and all these large LLMs and also other types of generative AI. We are just saying that it has to be used with caution. It has to be used responsibly. And we have also advised the institutions and the lecturers to also embrace and become role models so that the students can actually benefit from the usage of these tools to enhance the teaching and learning assessments, and also in order for them to further understand and better understand the students. Because if we do not know the nature of how, for example, ChatGPT works, then how can you detect or be able to distinguish whether the work is genuinely done by the students or not? So there are so many things that I think by learning or learning by doing is actually important for every aspect or every stakeholders involved, including the institutions and also the lecturers themselves. So institutions have to come up with guidelines on how to use the, for example, ChatGPT. And lecturers, we advise them to become role models, to also explore into all these generative AIs. Because we are not talking only on text to text, we are talking about text to video, text to images. We have Midjourney. So we have so many other types of generative AIs that we have to handle and be able to understand So different field of study maybe requires different usage and different interpretation and different treatment of all this generative AI. So that's currently what we are seeing. We are not banning generative AI, including ChatGPT. We are saying that please go on with it, but use it ethically and responsibly.
I mean, obviously, I know that you speak to lots of QA bodies around the world. Is that the general approach that's being taken globally?
Oh, well, that's a good question, actually. So in the global scene, we have this, what we call as the Global Academic Integrity Network GAIN, which is actually a network of QA bodies led by QQI and also by TEXA Australia. So we have more than 20 members now in the network. So what we do is actually we are sharing our experiences and we learn from one another, because this is such a diverse and fast evolving field in terms of the, when we talk about GPT itself, from GPT 3.5 now you have GPT 4.0 and so on. So it's fast evolving. So we need to know what are the, the new case studies, and then that is actually shared among all the network members. So we have that in place, and of course, different countries, different organizations have different approach to this. But in general, I think everyone is in a way accepting that this is something that we have to live with, and we have to embrace it one way or another.
Great, thank you very much. Let's move on to the sort of the pedagogical impact, and back to Graham and Shahira. We've seen the sort of kind of positive impact that it can have, and we've also looked at the negative. Both of you looked at the positive and the negative. I'm kind of interested in how we can promote the positive to more broadly, so that the positive impacts happen, but the negative ones don't, if you see what I mean. Graham, over to you.
Thanks, Guy. I think that's really tough, because we can promote the positive stuff, but people can always use the negatives. Do I think the only way? I think one way, it may be the only way, is there's got to be really harsh penalties if you get caught. So if you submit a paper and ChatGPT and the reviewers spot it, or it's found out and it can be proven, then you can't submit to that journal anymore, which it happens now. If you submit a plagiarized paper, you can get banned from the journal for life or for 5 years or whatever. But they've really got to show their teeth and do that. And one of the things I put in my slides was, if people put in things like regenerate response, it's an obvious show that they've used ChatGPT, but they shouldn't just change the paper. They should issue an erratum, and they should say what's happened to the authors. The authors have been told they can't submit. So unfortunately, I don't think you can really promote it so that everyone acts in an ethical way. I think in some ways you have to punish the unethical aspects of what people are doing. Yeah.
What about at the lower level, though? When we're talking about undergraduate students who are using ChatGPT and LLM, what is that? Again, you should take a harsh approach?
Well, yeah, I'm speaking as an ex-provost and CEO of Nottingham, so I might not have said this when I was actually running the place, but I can. I do think you have to be pretty harsh. You have to be proven. If you get caught plagiarizing or cheating, you can get 0 marks for that element of your course. But I also think in this day and age, if it's found out post your degree, there should be ways of revoking your degree. That's really difficult to do at the moment, and it's not something you would do lightly. Let's be honest about that. But yeah, I think unless you show people that actually, if you do this, bad things are going to happen, then people are going to do bad things, because what's the consequence? So just because you're a student, by student I mean 18-year-olds, I'm talking tertiary education.
Yeah.
Just because you're younger than 20 doesn't mean you're stupid or don't understand the ethical aspects of it. But if you go back, the further you go back in time, i.e. the earlier you are, then probably more difficult it gets. But that's where it should come in. promoting ethics through primary, secondary school. So when they enter university and work in life, they've got that inbuilt. But yeah, so I don't know. I'd like to, if there's another suggestion where you're not just whacking people with a stick after showing them a carrot, I'd like to hear it.
Well, Shahira, maybe have you got another suggestion other than whacking with a stick or a carrot approach?
The sexy and the wacky. Okay, I do agree with Professor Kendall. It's very difficult to actually enforce, okay, anything. But what I do is usually when it comes to assessment, to answer your question, Guy, what I do is I integrate elements that need critical thinking. When it comes to research, for example, if they use ChatGPT, is trained from the data that is already there. So sometimes we work on problems that are not there. So they do need to actually integrate a critical thinking. I mean, they can use it for the support, right? And then when it comes to assessment, I usually integrate presentations. So presentation use a very strict rubric in presentation. I want them to present. I will look at the gesture, the way that they answer the questions, and I would ask questions that probably is non-existent. I mean, it will be very hard for them to actually browse ChatGPT and get it. And that is what I do. I mean, they can use it to look at scenarios and what, but the questions that we usually set, at least me personally, this is not something that they can actually just type out in Google and get the answer. So there needs to be some kind of critical element, and the rubrics will have to be really well thought of.
Right, thank you. Kabir, over to you. You've heard some of the academics talk about. I mean, you must see different behaviours amongst the students you're familiar with. I mean, do you have concerns about some of the ethical uses of GPT and LLMs?
All right, so the ethical use of it, I think the students should have they should be taught on how to use it the most effective way, because the curriculum should integrate AI tools so that the students can learn from it how to use it the most ethical way that's possible. Because with all the with this generation and everyone getting their hands on AI tools, the uses of it is becoming very common these days. So even me as a student, I'm using it. Maybe it was not developed for students. It was developed to used in more professional places. But me as a student getting my hands on it, I do make sure that I make a use of it 100%. So as it's not controllable at this moment how the students are getting their hands on the AI tools, I believe the university should do a proper teaching for the students on how they should use it. And even if the university thinks that some of the AI platforms will be beneficial for the students, that they can use it for their job purpose in future and everything, the university should provide with subscription to AI tools that the students can use.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and presumably it needs to go back to the school level as well. Obviously, this suddenly just exploded, but it needs the proper use of AI and ChatGPT needs to go back to the school level. Kyril, you've spoken about the sort of idea of modelling positively. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. Sort of providing, positive role models and peer models. What sort of roles can you have in developing that?
Yeah, basically, as a lecturer instructor, of course, we should, as I said, in embracing AI and generative AI in general, you have to maybe perhaps use AI to maybe generate, for example, how you come up with assessment questions on your teaching and learning activities. You can even show that to the students. So what is important is to show that and teach them while doing that, what are the things ethically that you should be doing and what is not. So leading by example is very important. And then I think the most important thing in terms of all of this is basically when we want to engage and the students in it, is basically the responsibility part of the entire thing, and also how you actually own the knowledge that you actually acquire. So I think ChatGPT can generate based on your prompt, draft and answers and things like that. But and it may be correct, it may be not. So one thing is to be able to facilitate learning. I mean, from the lecturer's point of view, you need to be able to facilitate learning by telling the students that, okay, this can be, generated from the generative AI, but it may not be necessarily entirely correct. And you have to do your due diligence to check the facts against, what is actually being prompted by ChatGPT. And one more thing is in terms of the assessments, of course, I think there's a lot more of things that needs to be done by the lecturer. Now that since there is this tools that is available to the students, so we need to do extra work in ensuring that, like what Dr. Shahira said, that the questions are not easily, answers can be easily obtained through the means of ChatGPT. So you need to maybe do some different approach in terms of when trying to see whether the students really understood what is actually being learned in class through interviews, to different type of modalities and how you can triangulate with the students and ensuring that he or she actually acquired and actually understood the knowledge in entirety. So I think that's very important, and it has to be shown through you as a role model. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Obviously, feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. I'll open it more formally to the chat in about 5 minutes or so. And we've got until 4 o'clock today. But I wanted to sort of open it up to an issue I don't think we've covered in terms of equity and access, and how LLMs maybe have the potential to widen educational access and support students with disabilities, for example. So how can we maximize the benefits to ensure that all students, regardless of their backgrounds and abilities, can thrive in higher education? So basically, do we see these developments as opening up, in terms of the whole area of equity and access? Maybe I can start with Shahira, and then over to Graham. Shahira, if you're still there.
Yes, I'm here. Guy, can you please repeat? Because you were breaking out.
Okay, did you hear the question?
No, you were breaking out.
Okay, maybe Graham, I'll repeat the question because Shahira, you probably haven't had time to think about it. Let me repeat the question. I'll pass it to Graham and then back to you, Shahira.
Okay.
Graham, you had the question about equity and access. Is the whole idea of, does it have the potential to widen educational access for students with disabilities, for example? So how can we maximize the benefit to ensure that students, regardless of their background or their abilities, can thrive in higher education?
Yeah, I think I'm not ideally placed to answer this, but I think ChatGPT 3.5 is free to use, so anyone can use that, and I think that's free. ChatGPT 4 is a paid-for version, and it's much better. It's more up to date. It's got access to more recent work. But I'd be interested if someone actually knows the answer to this question. I only use ChatGPT just because there's so many around. I can't just keep up with it. I saw a report yesterday that I think 100 new tools have been rolled out this month, and there's thousands this year. You just can't keep up. But I did try Bard the other day, and that link, I think it uses ChatGPT 4 underneath, and it also links with DALL-E 2, I think, so you can actually do image generation as well. And if that's the case, then I don't need to pay for ChatGPT 4. But I'm not sure whether what I've just said is true. But I think it is incumbent on the universities to make these tools available. So I'm an emeritus professor of Nottingham at the moment. I don't believe we have, actually Ros could tell us because she's still at the university, but I don't believe we have access to LLMs as a course in the same way we have access to Microsoft Office, Turnitin, etc. And I think universities need to make LLMs available. But the problem they'll have is what ones do they make available? Because computer scientists might want this version, and social scientists might want this version. Some people want image generation, and there's videos, etc. There's literally thousands of them about. But of course, it comes back again in the same way that I can access Web of Science and Scopus, etc., and lots of journals because the University of Nottingham subscribes to them. And some countries or some universities don't have the same access. So I think you're going to hit the same problem. So it's not a new problem, but I still think it is a problem if you're going to make it you want everyone to have the same access to these AI tools, and they are paid for versions, someone's got to pay for it. And it's the same problem as accessing journals and bibliographic databases. So I don't if I had an answer to your question, I'd have an answer to lots of other questions, which I don't have, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Shahira,
Yeah.
to you.
Okay. I actually, I honestly did not get the question really very clearly, but I think if you're asking about inclusivity, to include everyone to use it, is that your question?
Well, yeah, it's more about is there an opportunity for it to broaden access for everybody? Yeah.
Well, for the time being, like Professor Kendall said, that it is open access. But we as computer scientists also, foresee that this is not going to be that long, that it's going to be open access. Everything is moving towards commercialization. Now we have a problem. An example, we used to get, like, for natural language processing, we used to crawl data, or we used to get data from Twitter, X. Now it's on X. Nowadays, Twitter is not free anymore. I mean, if you want to get data from Twitter, you have to pay. Even we do not have this academic access anymore. So you have to pay like a month, 100 USD. If you have a grant, that is still considered expensive to pay, 1,200 per year USD. Right. So nowadays we're having that problem, that we are not able, those who are in NLP, we are just using open access like Kaggle, some of these sites, but it's not enough because it's not really representative of the real world. The labeling, we have these labeling problems. But yes, but with for the time being, ChatGPT is free. Okay. But I do foresee that in time to come, it's going to, it's going to be premium or something like that. Right. Then we will have to start to pay for it, and especially students with, like I said, with students influx from China. What I do foresee is that, when you take away ChatGPT, it will be like they are losing an arm or a leg. So I do see that everything that on the internet will be moving towards commercialization anyway.
Let's hope Elon Musk is not circling around it. Okay,
I never know.
Kyril, over to you, Prof. Kyril. Again, this idea of equity and access and opening up, and also it's something that both Graham and Shahira mentioned in their presentations about perhaps ChatGPT being quite Western-centric as well in terms of its approach. So could you touch on both those areas of access, and also that perhaps the idea that in the current models of ChatGPT, it's a little Western-centric?
Well, Guy, you'll be surprised that ChatGPT can even understand the dialects in Malay, Okay. And it can basically understand and be able to answer that in quite precisely, matter of fact. So I think that is a tool, definitely, that can actually bridge the gap. But in the same time, maybe a risk of the gap broadening out if you're talking about access to the internet, because I think all these LLMs requires connectivity. So connectivity is an issue in general in many parts of the world. You don't have access, speedy internet access, even basic internet infrastructure in some of the rural areas. So those who are in these regions will be deprived of the opportunity to use ChatGPT and other LLMs. So that gap might be broadening if we are not careful. So I think it has to come hand in hand with the access to connectivity to the internet. I think that's very important. When that happens, perhaps I think it may be able to help. For example, Dr. Shahira was mentioning about students from China. They may rely on, when you talk about disability, one of it is, of course, disability. One of it is actually understanding other languages. Yes. So that can also be a part of how this ChatGPT or LLMs can actually be able to help and assist students in understanding the content better, be able to maybe communicate better. But again, if you what is important, I think again is how responsible you are in using it and how you yourself would want to learn. Because I think without that motivation to learn, then this is all tools, and if you take away the tools, then you are still at the status quo that I think it defeats the purpose of learning in the first place. So that's my personal opinion on this. And of course, what was the other question again, Guy?
Well, I think you covered it earlier about the kind of Western.
Yeah. So I think yeah, of course, that part language is also I have tried because I learned in Japan before, so I've used Japanese prompts and
Sure.
ChatGPT was able to also answer me in Japanese. So I think I've tested at least with a few languages, so it works well for me. So I think that part, yeah, although it's Western centric, but it can be used by people around the world.
I think it was more the point was raised by kind of Shahira earlier on that the whole corpus, the whole knowledge in terms of
I see, yeah.
tends to be.
I think it's more on the knowledge and the ideas rather than
okay, yeah, that might be true because it uses crawling and getting all the information from the net. So it depends on who provides the information, what kind of information is available on the net and things like that. So of course, when you ask certain questions, especially those delicate questions, it may be actually prompt towards certain part of the side of the opinion. So I think that part, yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a question in the meeting chat. It's from Dr. Rosalini, who Graham mentioned earlier. Rosalini, yes, you wanted to come in on access and special needs. Please turn on your camera if you can.
Yep. Can you see me, Guy?
Let me just, sorry, I've just got my. Yes, I can. I can see half. I can see half.
Now, I wanted to very quickly just pick up from where Professor Khairul mentioned about language translations and support. That is a big access issue to many students.
Yeah.
So using ChatGPT basically helps you with your English. So for students from China, they would find that using ChatGPT helps them. For example, Dr. Shahira talked about students from China, so I'm just using it as an example here again. So ChatGPT actually provides them with that additional support. And I also wanted to pick up on what Kabir mentioned earlier. He said, when you're working late at night, midnight and whatever, ChatGPT is like a social and emotional support for him. It kind of helps him to focus and to get the answer that he's looking for. And I also think the other benefits of ChatGPT would be using spoken words. If you have problems typing, or you may be actually just speak and then translate that into written words. You can even use ChatGPT to summarize difficult information, difficult subject matter that you have difficulty understanding. ChatGPT will be able to help you summarize that. So I think there are many other benefits that we can actually use for students with special needs. And I don't think we should disregard the value of ChatGPT for these types of students.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. Rosford, coming in on that. Kabir, and again, sort of similar lines. I mean, you're based in Bangladesh. You've got colleagues, obviously, and have they found it useful in terms of that language, that access to language, who perhaps when their first language is not necessarily English?
What I have noticed is that right now, as I'm still a student and I'm communicating with a lot of students from China, because they joined the program and everything. So I do see a wide use of ChatGPT in them. That's because they're very weak in English and there's a huge communication gap in between us. As a result, I noticed that even if I'm asking them some questions, sometimes the answers are like ChatGPT generated. So they're completely dependent on ChatGPT to even communicate with their friends. So it has a very wide use among all the students.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yasrina, you had a question as well. Maybe you can come in and ask it for us. I know you put it in the chat.
Right. Okay. There are few questions here that I pose. One of the things that what measures can be taken, to ensure, because we are talking about, Kabir is saying, as a student, I know most of us, even the academics themselves, all right, use a ChatGPT. And Prof. Khairul has also mentioned that we have to use it ethically. All right. So, but what measures can be taken to make sure, I mean, as an academic, I would probably have some idea to tell the students how you can use it, right? But at the end of the day, when there's huge number of students, right, you can't tell them that you can't use it. They will definitely use it. So how do you get what kind of measures to ensure that these students can develop necessary research skills or writing skills, all right, to make sure that because they will have lots of data and whatnot, but what are the other ways? I mean, we were to tell them, let's do it ethically. Yeah, we can tell that. They can just go, yeah, we'll do it ethically, but how do you go about it? I mean, that would be my concern as an academy. I can't be possibly checking every single word. Wow, that's definitely, if I have like 50, 60 in a class, that's very, very, I would say very, very challenging. So any ideas from the speakers on that matter?
Great, well, I'll open up. Anybody can come in. Anybody want to come in? Just raise your hand. Graham, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the question we had before, but I've probably thought about it a bit. I think one thing you could do would be to have, and I'm looking at MQA here because I was back in Nottingham when MQA said you've got to run these courses. I'm not looking at MQA saying, please make this a mandatory course, but you could have a mandatory course on ethics, which covers ChatGPT. You have to pass it. Once you've passed it, you're then essentially saying, I know what about ethics. So if I breach the ethical guidelines, then, you know, there's no comeback because you've done the course and you've passed it. I think there's also an argument for having at least one, maybe not an exam, but one assessment period or one assessment time where you're either interviewed, and I think Shahira said it earlier on, you're either interviewed, so you know, you've got no recourse to ChatGPT, or you have a closed room exam, you know, no internet, all you've got is a word processor and you're asked a question and you've got to, you know, it might not be the best answer you've ever given in the world, but at least you can show that you can write in a coherent way, you can actually put logical arguments down, even though you don't have access to all the data. So they would be the two things I would suggest: an ethical course, which you have to pass, and then by definition, you're ethical. And the other thing is you have some sort of closed room exams, either interviews or written, but you don't have access to ChatGPT, just so you can gauge if the student's actually doing everything with ChatGPT.
Yeah, Carol, maybe you can comment on that, and Shahir, I'll come to you in a minute.
Yeah, I think this issue has actually cropped up even before the emergence of GPT. We are talking about, you know, when previously we were checking theses using Turnitin, for example. You know, you could have just copied the entire thing and put it, and then students are very smart. Instead of putting it in text form, you put it as an image form, and it's not being detected by Turnitin. You get very low similarity, but then eventually it's actually all images instead of, you know, text-based. So students will always find ways on how to beat the system. So that's why I think we educators will need to be able to try and understand what are the threats and, you know, what are the opportunities and what are the things that students may be looking at in terms of all this, you know, misuse of in this case, ChatGPT, for example. So I think, and the same applies to, because my field is actually in robotics and AI. So I'm really very much into this. And we know that previously in robotics, for example, we had all codes available on open source. And it's very, very tough to detect whether the students copy and, you know, exactly what they from the internet. So the only way to be able to actually triangulate is through interviews, through you know, you do it in front of me kind of like approach. So I think there must be some mix of this kind of assessments in place for us to be able to you know, evaluate and be able to actually measure whether a student is you know, meeting or actually learning and having all the learning outcomes that we actually intend them to have in the end. So I think that's my take. But it's going to be very, very tough and very, very tedious for the lecturers, definitely, as you mentioned, Dr. Yazrina.
Thank you, Prof. Carol. Shahira.
Yes, I just want to share an experience, and rather an experiment that I did with a bunch of my students. So the last semester, when we first started, I have quite a small class. So half the student in the first hour of the lecture, half of the student, I asked them to do, I gave them an assignment and I asked them to finish the assignment with, they're free to use ChatGPT if they want. And the other half, I told them not to use ChatGPT. And at the end of the hour, the 1 hour, I asked them to present. So clearly the group that we're using ChatGPT, they have finished it much earlier. They have much more information, but they are not able to convey the information when I ask them to present it. Whereas the other group could do it quite well. So what I did was I told them, look, this is what will happen if you're trying to use ChatGPT all the time without using any critical, thinking. If you're going to, so it's all about instilling the realization, inside them. I mean, after some time, they do realize it, and they, some of them did, some of them got the message, and throughout the course, throughout the semester, most of the students did not actually use 100% ChatGPT to submit their coursework. So I was quite happy with that. That's just a sharing from here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was just looking at messages about the time. We've got about a couple of minutes, I guess. Maybe I can just, if you can just kind of summarize in 30 seconds each, whether you're optimistic about the future. So kind of question I always ask: are you optimistic about the future in terms of this whole area, ChatGPT, LLMs, etc., etc.? I'll go around the panel. Graham, if you can start. Optimistic?
I'm optimistic. I'm a computer scientist with an interest in AI, so I'm optimistic about the future of AI. I don't have any qualms about that. I'm not optimistic about scholarly publishing. I think ChatGPT, predatory publishing, paper mills, selling of authorships is a perfect storm, and I think it's a tsunami which is going to hit the academic world, the research academic world, like nothing it's ever seen before. And I do honestly fear for the integrity of the scientific archive. It survived 350 years. It might not survive another 20 years where we can have confidence in it. So optimistic about AI, not optimistic about scientific publishing.
Understood. Great, thank you. Kabir, optimistic? Pessimistic?
Yeah, I am. I believe that there will be a flood of data from ChatGPT by the students, because I'm talking from the point of view of students.
Sure.
From all the data that will be generated and everything, there will be a flood of data. It will be very difficult for the lecturers to identify the information that they have got from ChatGPT and what they have done on their own. I could recommend, like, the students could have some workshop on the university where the university could collaborate with the AI programs, where the students can learn the right ethics and how they can use it for their academic to get the best result.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Kabir. Shahira.
I am cautiously optimistic.
Okay, good.
I'm cautiously optimistic. Actually, when it comes to assessment, I think it's going to put a lot more. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to the educators to try to gauge genuine quality, from the student. That's what I think when it comes to assessment, because we are not able to stop it anyway.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. And Carol, over to you. And you can respond either as a regulator from MQA or as a professor of robotics, whichever side you want to come from.
Both ways, I think we have to embrace. So I'm very optimistic on this. It's just that on the regulatory side, we have to do extra job to foresee how is this going to all, affect or impact learning, higher education, not just higher education, education as a whole. And even in the future of jobs as well, because we are talking about learners now, students who are born in Gen Alpha and Beta. So they are basically AI native now. So whether we like it or not, yes, we have to embrace it. I'm very optimistic on that, but we have a lot of work ahead of us. Especially baby boomers and Gen Z X like me, we have a lot of catching up to do.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks to the panel. Thanks everybody for joining the panel. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for the organisers. I'll now hand it back to Dr. Yasrina, Prof. Yasrina, excuse me, for some closing comments. Yasrina.
Yep. Thank you so much, Guy. And thank you, everyone. Thank you. Special thank you to definitely Professor Insigne Dr. Hairul Saleh Muhammad Sahari. He's the Deputy CEO of MQA, right? And of course, to Professor Graham Kendall, yeah, and Dr. Shahira Labai Lutfi, and Mr. Kabir, right? The postgraduate student, and of course, to Mr. Guy Paring, who had done such a marvelous job, all right, in moderating the session. Now, fellow members of PenDaPaT and ladies and gentlemen, it is hoped that all of the participants are able to get some insights on how one can use LLM more effectively. All right. Wait, I've got to mute the person. Okay, as mentioned earlier, the topic is indeed timely as we are celebrating the Academia Month, in which the use of AI in the learning and research in higher education cannot be separated. I mean, it's there, so you've just got to use it. And how can the academics deal with it in a much better way, right? And this afternoon, we have heard two speakers talking about LLM and their impact on higher education and the ethical use of large language models alongside with the panel discussion. Now, let me recap a little bit. Dr. Shahira has spoken about the sexy and wacky side of LLM and how students are now using ChatGPT first to find information rather than using Google. Now, she concludes that LLM is not a shortcut and there is a need to produce students who are critical thinkers instead of just finding solution. Prof. Graham, on the other hand, all right, talks about the bad, the good, and the ugly, where he summarized, with that LLM is used to summarize paper, to restructure sentences, to help to draft abstracts, and the ugly side of LLM, which is the use of LLM that makes someone or people become lazy. And, they don't really think, you just cut and paste. And of course, the challenges faced in the areas of scientific writing and the significant opportunities for unethical publishers, right? So both speakers have talked about the impact. We can see it from the positive side, we can see it from the negative side. Now, this panel discussion just now also talks about how the students are using the LLM, all right, in helping them to do the work and the concerns of using LLM, where the MQA or somebody in the institutions, or right, the advisory body, to provide an advisory note where the academic community or the university community is being advised to use it ethically and responsibly, all right, to help in enhancing their understanding of the subject matter. Therefore, institutions have to come out with guidelines, and the academia, in a way, has to be a role model. And of course, to be ahead of the students. And like Prof. Cairo was mentioning just now, it's difficult for those who are baby boomers, who are Generation X like me, to keep up with the technology. All right. But at the end of the day, we wish that the students will be able to graduate and become someone who knows how to use things ethically and be able to actually flourish when they go to the industry, not just merely passing exams with good grades. Yeah. So it is very, very important for an academic to educate the students. Yeah. So we need somehow to learn from them, but also to be able to guide them. So hence that leads to a change of an academic duty. It is no longer merely teaching or transferring knowledge or advising them or supervising them, but to be able to mentor and coach the students to use all these AI tools more effectively and ethically. And at the end of the day, when they go out of the university, they become that particular person who's able to think and who's able to solve the problems, all right, with the use of the technology. Okay. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the dynamic interplay between LLM, large language models, and higher education is very important. We can't deny that. It's there. All right. And it also redefines the future of learning, the future of teaching, and knowledge acquisition. So as we embrace the immense potential that these models bring to our educational landscape, it is imperative that we uphold the ethical standards. I think this is what we have been talking, and responsible practices in their integration. Therefore, by ensuring transparent guidelines and fostering a culture of integrity and accountability, we can then harness the transformative power of these models, and at the same time safeguarding the values in the pursuit of knowledge. So let us remain vigilant and proactive in our endeavor to leverage technology for the betterment of higher education, promoting an environment that nurtures critical thinking, creativity, and ethical scholarship. So together, let's continue to pave the way for a sustainable and ethical-driven educational ecosystem that empowers generations to come. So again, my special thank you goes to all the speakers, for lending your time to speak, and also for the participants for spending your time to listen to all the speakers. And before I forget, allow me to share this, because this is a very hot topic. Yeah. At the end, wait, hold on, let me share. If you can see that. All right. This is organized by Monash University, where Prof. Graham Kendall is one of the speakers as well, right? ChatGPT, its effect on tertiary education, which is going to be conducted on 31st October 2023. So do come, it is online, all right? And of course, no, it's face-to-face, but then there is an online, you can view it, if I'm not mistaken, on the Facebook. It's already stated that you can find some information. Just go on the web, type this title, you'll be able to find it, all right? So with that, all right, it is hoped that everyone had gained further understandings and able to use the points mentioned for the future work. And please keep posted on other activities by PenDaPaT in the future. Thank you and have a very good evening. I pass the session back to Dr. Amrita, the MC.
Thank you, everyone. Indeed, it was a very, very stimulating session, and it is a pressing issue, and I hope we all continue to participate in this dialogue and find a way out. I'm not sure if we have concluded whether it's a friend or foe, but we do have, reminders that how do we use this, this technology and benefit everyone who uses it. So thank you once again to the speakers and to PenDaPaT for organizing a very important topic. And we look forward to seeing all of you in our next series.
Dr. Amrita, can we get everyone to switch on the camera for now so that we can take a picture?
That's very important. Yes, please turn on. We can take our pictures. Yes.
I'm just going to be a ghost for now.
Sorry, Dr. Shahira.
You can
We'll use the AI and put your picture there. Okay.
Okay, please. You can generate it from LLM.
Yeah. Can someone? Okay, I'm trying to take a. Okay, now for the first screen, can everyone smile?
I am, okay?
All right, there you are. Wait, let me once again. The first screen, smile. Okay, now the second screen. Everyone do turn your camera on so that we'll be able to see you. All right. Okay, smile. The third screen, again. Smile. Okay, I think that's about it. Yep. All right then. Back to you, Dr. Amrita.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon again. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Have a very good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.